The Galactic Research Institute was known for sending its scholars to the most extreme environments across the universe. But Professor Tom Reed, a human scientist stationed at Research Base Alpha on the ice planet Frost 7, had never seen an alien researcher quite like Dr. Blue. The tall, crystalline being stood nearly 8 feet tall, with a translucent body that seemed to shimmer with internal light. As the head xenobiologist of the institute, Dr. Blue had visited countless worlds, but Earth's extreme weather adaptation techniques fascinated him the most. "Your species continues to perplex me," Dr. Blue said, his voice resonating like wind chimes as he stared through the base's reinforced windows at the raging blizzard outside. The temperature display showed -120 degrees Celsius, cold enough to freeze most known forms of life instantly. Tom smiled as he pulled on his specialized thermal suit. "We humans have always found ways to survive in harsh conditions. Would you like to see something interesting?" Dr. Blue's crystalline form pulsed with curious blue light. "In this deadly storm? Even my species, evolved for cold environments, finds these conditions challenging." "Trust me," Tom said, checking his suit's seals. "I'm going to show you one of humanity's oldest survival techniques, something we learned thousands of years ago from Earth's Arctic peoples." The alien scholar watched in fascination as Tom gathered several tools: a large snow saw, a measuring stick, and what appeared to be a simple knife. "You intend to go out there, to build something?" "Better than that," Tom replied, his voice now coming through the suit's communication system. "I'm going to show you how humans can create shelter in any frozen environment using nothing but snow and basic tools." Dr. Blue's crystalline body flickered with both concern and curiosity. "Fascinating. But surely your artificial shelters are superior?" Tom laughed as he approached the airlock. "Sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective. Would you like to observe? Your environmental shield should protect you for at least an hour." The alien scholar hesitated only briefly before activating his personal force field. "I would not miss this demonstration for all the knowledge in the Institute's archives." As they stepped out into the howling storm, Tom could barely see 10 feet ahead. But that was exactly what he needed. The dense, driving snow would provide perfect building materials. He began to pace out a circular area, marking it in the deep snow. Dr. Blue's internal lights pulsed rapidly as he recorded every movement, every decision. Here was a human, a creature from a relatively warm planet, about to attempt construction in conditions that would kill most species in minutes. The story of what happened next would soon become one of the most popular lectures in the Institute's entire database of xenological studies. The howling wind whipped crystals of ice against Tom's thermal suit as he worked methodically in the bitter cold. Dr. Blue watched in amazement as the human began cutting large blocks of snow with precise, practiced movements. "The secret," Tom's voice crackled through the communication system, "is finding the right kind of snow. Too soft, and the blocks won't hold. Too hard, and you can't cut them properly." He pressed his gloved hand into the snow, testing its density. "This storm has given us perfect building material." Dr. Blue's crystalline form vibrated with excitement as he recorded the process. "Your species learned this technique without advanced technology? Simply through observation and trial?" "Exactly," Tom replied, carefully cutting his first snow block. It was roughly 2 feet long, 1 foot high, and 8 inches thick. Our ancestors in Earth's Arctic regions perfected this over thousands of years. They didn't have thermal suits or force fields, just fur clothing and determination. The alien scholar's internal lights flickered rapidly as he processed this information. In his thousands of years studying different species, he had never seen such adaptation without genetic or technological modification. Tom continued working, placing the first block in the circular outline he had marked. He angled it slightly inward, the beginning of what would become a spiral. Each subsequent block would lean a bit more toward the center, eventually forming a dome. "Notice how each block is slightly tapered?" Tom explained, trimming the edges with his knife. That's crucial for the structure's stability. It's simple geometry, but it makes all the difference. Dr. Blue moved closer, his force field creating a slight distortion in the falling snow around him. The mathematics involved: you're creating a complex architectural structure using nothing but frozen water and basic tools. This defies conventional xenological theories about primitive survival techniques. Block by block, the walls began to rise. Tom worked steadily, his movements efficient and purposeful despite the devastating cold. The temperature had dropped another 5 degrees, but the growing structure already provided some shelter from the howling wind. In my research, Dr. Blue said, his voice thoughtful, I've documented species that evolve thick fur, natural antifreeze in their blood, or even internal heating systems. But your kind, you simply figured out how to use the very thing that threatens you as protection against itself. Tom paused his work to look at the alien scholar. That's humanity in a nutshell, Doctor. We're not the strongest, fastest, or most naturally adapted species. But we observe, learn, and find ways to not just survive, but thrive. As the structure grew higher, Dr. Blue's recording devices captured every detail. The way Tom carefully shaped each block. The precise spiral pattern of construction, the mathematical perfection of the angles, it was all being preserved for future study at the Institute. There's something almost artistic about it, Dr. Blue observed, watching as Tom sealed gaps between blocks with loose snow. The practical merging with the beautiful. The igloo was nearly halfway complete now, its curved walls rising steadily against the dark, storm-filled sky. Tom's breath was visible inside his helmet as he worked, but his movements remained steady and sure. Wait until you see the finished product, Tom said, a note of pride in his voice. This is more than just a shelter. It's a testament to human ingenuity, proof that with enough understanding of our environment, we can make a home anywhere. Little did Tom know that his simple demonstration would soon become required study material for every xenology student in the galaxy. The storm intensified as Tom reached the critical phase of construction. The temperature plummeted to -125 degrees Celsius, and the wind howled with renewed fury. Dr. Blue's sensors detected dangerous ice crystals forming in the air, sharp enough to damage most space-grade materials. Perhaps we should return to the base, Dr. Blue suggested, his crystalline form dimming slightly with concern. My data shows these conditions are approaching lethal levels, even for my species. Tom paused his work, now standing on the snow blocks he'd already placed. The igloo had reached chest height, and he was beginning the most challenging part, the dome's upper curve. This is exactly when we need to finish, he said firmly. In survival situations, you don't always get to choose your timing. Dr. Blue's analytical mind struggled to process the human's seeming disregard for the deteriorating conditions. Your thermal suit's power supply must be draining rapidly in this cold. It is, Tom acknowledged, carefully positioning another block. But that's why we need to work faster. The igloo itself will protect us once it's complete. No power supply needed. The alien scholar watched in fascination as Tom demonstrated another crucial technique. Using his knife, he cut the top edge of each new block at an increasingly steep angle, creating a spiral that gradually curved inward. The mathematics of it were elegant in their simplicity. The blocks support each other, Tom explained, his breathing now slightly labored from the exertion. Each one leans on the last, distributing the weight perfectly. It's like a puzzle where every piece is crucial. Suddenly, a violent gust of wind threatened to topple the structure. Tom quickly braced himself against the partially built dome, using his body to shield it from the blast. Dr. Blue's sensors recorded the human's heart rate spike, but there was no panic in his movements, only calculated adjustment. That was close, Tom said, checking the blocks for any shift. But see how the curved shape actually helps deflect the wind? Our ancestors figured out that aerodynamics long before we had the science to explain it. As the walls curved further inward, Tom had to modify his technique. He now cut the blocks slightly smaller, maintaining the perfect arc that would eventually close at the top. Dr. Blue's recording devices captured the precise angles, noting how each block was positioned to transfer weight to the layer below. In all my studies, Dr. Blue mused, his voice filled with academic excitement, I've never seen such an elegant solution to extreme weather survival. Your species turned simple frozen water into an engineering marvel. Tom continued working steadily, though Dr. Blue noticed the human's movements were becoming stiffer as the cold penetrated even his advanced thermal suit. The igloo was now nearly head height, with only the top portion remaining to be built. The next part is tricky, Tom said, his breath visible inside his helmet. The blocks get smaller and more angled as we reach the top. One wrong placement, and we might have to start over. Dr. Blue's sensors detected the human's core temperature dropping slightly, despite the thermal suit's best efforts. Yet Tom's focus remained unwavering, each movement precise and purposeful. You know, Tom added, carefully lifting another block into position, some people think technology makes these old techniques obsolete. But look at us now, your force field is draining power, my suit's heating system is struggling, but this igloo? It'll keep working without any power at all. The alien scholar's crystalline form pulsed with understanding. Here was the true essence of human ingenuity, not just surviving, but finding solutions that worked with nature rather than against it. As they worked against time and dropping temperatures, neither of them realized they were about to face an even greater challenge, one that would put both the igloo and human innovation to the ultimate test. The first warning came as a subtle vibration in the ground beneath their feet. Tom, balanced precariously while placing one of the final blocks near the igloo's top, felt it through his boots. Dr. Blue's sensors immediately began flashing urgent patterns of light through his crystalline form. Seismic activity, the alien scholar announced, his usual calm voice now tinged with urgency. This planet's crust is highly unstable during extreme temperature drops. My readings suggest. Before he could finish, a much stronger tremor shook the area. Several snow blocks from the nearly completed igloo shifted dangerously. Tom quickly pressed his body against them, preventing a collapse that would have erased an hour's worth of work. Your thermal suit's power is at 18%, Dr. Blue reported, his sensors scanning continuously. My force field cannot maintain integrity much longer in these conditions. We must return to the base. Tom looked at the research base in the distance, barely visible through the storm. Then he looked at his nearly finished igloo. The top opening was only about 2 feet wide now, just a few more blocks would complete it. No, Tom said firmly, his voice steady despite the cold. The base is too far, and we're losing power too quickly. Our best chance is to finish this igloo right now. Another tremor rocked the ground. In the distance, they heard the unmistakable sound of ice cracking, deep, thunderous reports that echoed across the frozen landscape. The planet's crust was literally tearing itself apart as the temperature continued to plummet. Fascinating decision, Dr. Blue observed, recording every detail even as his force field flickered. You choose to trust ancient building techniques over modern technology. The Institute will find this most interesting, if we survive. Tom managed a laugh as he carefully placed another block. That's the thing about human ingenuity, Doctor. We don't just build things, we build things that last. This igloo design has worked for thousands of years. No reason it won't work now. The next tremor was strong enough to knock loose snow from the igloo's outer surface, but the structure held. Tom's hands were shaking from cold and exhaustion inside his suit, but his movements remained precise. Each block had to be perfect, their lives might depend on it. Thermal suit at 12% power, Dr. Blue reported. His own crystalline form was showing signs of stress, tiny fractures appearing and healing continuously as his body fought against the extreme cold. My force field will fail in approximately 10 minutes. Tom nodded, focusing entirely on the final stages of construction. Almost there. See how these last blocks lock together? It's called a keystone effect. The pressure from each block helps hold the others in place. The colder it gets, the stronger they'll freeze together. A massive tremor shook the ground, lasting longer than the others. In the distance, they could see parts of the research base's outer walls collecting frost as its heating systems struggled against the unprecedented cold. Their window of opportunity was closing fast. "Thermal suit at 7% power," Dr. Blue announced. His voice was beginning to sound strained, his crystalline form clouding in places. "My force field is failing. Tom. I believe the correct human phrase is, we are running out of time." Tom placed the second-to-last block, his breathing heavy inside his rapidly cooling suit. The opening at the top was now barely big enough for his shoulders. One final block, the true keystone, would complete the structure. "Doctor," Tom said, his voice tense but determined, "I need your help with this last piece. It has to be perfect. The entire structure depends on it." As Dr. Blue moved to assist, another violent tremor shook the ground. Above them, through the howling storm, the sky had taken on a strange, dark purple color that neither of them had ever seen before. Something was happening to the planet's atmosphere itself, and they were about to be caught in the middle of it. The final block of snow had to be lowered into place from above, a task requiring perfect coordination between Tom and Dr. Blue. Tom's thermal suit was down to 5% power, and the alien scholar's force field flickered dangerously, its protective barrier becoming visible as patches of iridescent light. "Hold it at exactly this angle," Tom instructed, his voice rough from the cold. His hands guided Dr. Blue's crystalline appendages to support the block. "When I say now, lower it straight down. It has to lock with the surrounding blocks perfectly." The purple sky above had grown darker, and the temperature readout on Tom's suit displayed an impossible number, -135 degrees Celsius. The research base's external lights were barely visible through the storm now, its own systems clearly struggling against the planetary catastrophe. "Now!" Tom called out. Together, they lowered the final block. It slid into place with a satisfying crunch, completing the dome. Tom quickly packed snow into the tiny gaps around it, his movements urgent but precise. The entire structure was now sealed except for the small entrance tunnel he had built into the base. "Thermal suit critical," chimed the warning system in Tom's helmet. 3% power remaining. Seek immediate shelter. Dr. Blue's force field surged with alarming patterns of energy. "My protective systems are failing. The cold, it's beginning to affect my crystalline matrix." "Inside," Tom commanded, dropping to his hands and knees. "Crawl through the entrance tunnel. Quickly." The alien scholar had to compress his tall form considerably to fit through the low tunnel, his crystalline body scraping against the packed snow. Tom followed immediately behind him, pulling himself forward as another violent tremor shook the ground. Just as they got inside, Dr. Blue's force field failed completely. The alien's crystalline form immediately began to frost over, tiny ice crystals forming on his transparent surface. At the same instant, Tom's thermal suit gave its final warning beep and shut down. But instead of the killing cold they expected, both beings found themselves in an environment that was, surprisingly comfortable. "Remarkable," Dr. Blue said, his sensors rapidly analyzing their surroundings. "The temperature in here is significantly higher than outside. How is this possible with just packed snow?" Tom smiled despite his exhaustion, reaching up to touch the igloo's domed ceiling. "The snow itself insulates us from the cold. See how the blocks are already starting to fuse together? The colder it gets outside, the stronger this structure becomes." The alien scholar's form began to pulse with excited light as he conducted readings. "The air circulation is excellent, yet no direct wind enters. The dome shape distributes all structural pressure evenly. And, is that a small shelf built into the wall? Traditional feature, Tom explained, still breathing heavily from their exertion. Useful for placing tools, food, or in our case. He pulled a small emergency kit from his suit's pocket and placed it on the shelf. Backup power cells. Another tremor rocked the planet, but inside the igloo, they barely felt it. The structure moved slightly as a single unit, its curved walls and interlocked blocks working together to absorb and distribute the force. Outside, they could hear the storm reaching new levels of intensity, but the howling wind was muffled by the thick snow walls. "Your suit needs power," Dr. Blue observed, his scientific curiosity temporarily overshadowed by concern for his human companion. Tom nodded, already connecting one of the backup cells to his suit's power system. "Yes, but we don't need much. The igloo is doing most of the work now. This is why it's such a perfect survival shelter. It uses the very environment that's trying to kill you as protection instead." As if to test his words, the strongest tremor yet shook the frozen planet. Deep cracking sounds echoed across the landscape, and the strange purple sky flickered with bursts of atmospheric energy. But inside their snow shelter, Tom and Dr. Blue remained safe, protected by nothing more than carefully shaped blocks of frozen water and ancient human wisdom. Neither of them knew it yet, but the true test of the igloo's strength, and their survival skills, was still to come. The planet's deadly transformation was only beginning. Inside the igloo, Tom and Dr. Blue monitored the catastrophe unfolding outside through the alien scholars' sophisticated sensing equipment. The backup power cell had restored Tom's thermal suit to 40% capacity, enough to keep him alive, but not enough to risk venturing outside. "The planet's crust is experiencing a cascade failure," Dr. Blue reported, his crystalline form pulsing with rapid data patterns. "The extreme cold is causing the planetary core to contract at an unprecedented rate. My readings suggest." He was cut off by a deafening crack that sounded like thunder, followed by tremors that made the very air vibrate. Through the igloo's walls, they could hear the research base's emergency sirens wailing in the distance. "The base's primary power core just went offline," Tom said grimly, checking a small display on his suit's arm. "They're running on emergency systems now." He paused, looking at the thick snow walls surrounding them. "You know, it's ironic. All that advanced technology, and right now, we're probably in the safest structure on the planet." Dr. Blue's sensors swept the igloo's interior again, his amazement growing. "The temperature in here remains stable at -5°C, despite external temperatures now reaching -140°C. The snow walls are actually becoming stronger as the outer layer freezes harder." Another series of tremors shook the ground, accompanied by strange flashing lights in the purple sky above. The atmospheric disturbance was visible even through the small ventilation hole Tom had carefully crafted at the dome's peak. "The planet's magnetic field is destabilizing," Dr. Blue explained, his voice carrying an edge of scientific fascination despite their dire situation. "The atmospheric gases are beginning to crystallize. In all my centuries of research, I've never witnessed anything like this." Tom nodded, checking the stability of their snow blocks. Not a single one had shifted, despite the continuous tremors. "Our ancestors faced conditions almost this harsh during Earth's ice ages. They survived by passing down knowledge like this, techniques that work no matter how bad things get." The alien scholar's form brightened with sudden understanding. "That's why the Institute finds your species so fascinating. You don't just adapt yourselves to survive, you create adaptations that can be shared across generations. This igloo, it's not just a shelter. It's stored knowledge, practical wisdom given physical form." A massive shock wave rolled across the planet's surface. Through the igloo's walls, they could hear the distant sounds of the research base's outer structures creaking under the strain. The temperature outside plunged even lower, but inside their snow shelter, Tom and Dr. Blue remained protected. Look at this, Dr. Blue said suddenly, his sensors detecting something new. The wind patterns are changing. The storm is becoming organized. Structured. Tom pulled up his suit's atmospheric readings, his expression growing serious behind his helmet visor. The whole atmosphere is starting to circulate like a single giant storm system. I've never seen weather patterns like this. The geological changes are affecting everything, Dr. Blue confirmed. The planet's rotation is actually slowing due to the core contraction. Physics itself is beginning to break down on a planetary scale. Outside, the howling of the wind had changed pitch, becoming deeper, more rhythmic. The purple sky pulsed with waves of energy that made Dr. Blue's crystalline form resonate sympathetically. Even the ground beneath the igloo had begun to vibrate at a specific frequency. We need to warn the base, Tom said, trying to establish communication through his suit's systems. If what you're saying is true, they need to evacuate immediately. Their structures weren't built to withstand this kind of planetary transformation. But as he worked to make contact, both he and Dr. Blue noticed something else, something that made their current situation seem suddenly far more precarious. The temperature wasn't just dropping anymore. It was starting to fluctuate wildly, swinging between extremes in a matter of seconds. The planet wasn't just experiencing a crisis. It was approaching a critical point of no return. And their simple snow shelter was about to face its greatest test yet. The evacuation signal from the research base finally broke through the electromagnetic interference, 3 long pulses, a universal warning to abandon the planet. Through the igloo's ventilation hole, Tom and Dr. Blue could see emergency ships lifting off, their engines straining against the increasingly chaotic atmosphere. Temperature oscillation increasing, Dr. Blue reported, his crystalline form vibrating with the planet's resonant frequency. Shifting between -150 degrees Celsius and -80 degrees Celsius in seconds. The base's structures are beginning to shatter from thermal shock. Tom watched as the distant research facility, built with the most advanced materials in the galaxy, began to crack and splinter under the devastating temperature changes. But their igloo, made of nothing but carved snow, remained steady. It's the snow itself, Tom explained, placing his gloved hand against the curved wall. Its crystalline structure can expand and contract. The blocks are actually shifting slightly, working together. Our ancestors discovered this through centuries of trial and error. A blinding flash lit up the purple sky, followed by a shock wave that made the ground ripple like water. Dr. Blue's sensors went wild, his own crystalline body glowing with reflected energy. Planetary core reaching critical instability, he announced. We have perhaps 10 minutes before total crustal failure. The evacuation ships, they won't be able to return for us in time. Tom checked his suit's power level, 32%. Not enough for a long trek through the chaos outside. He looked at the igloo's walls, then back at his alien companion. Doctor, I need you to record everything about this structure. Every detail, every measurement, every principle at work here. Already doing so, Dr. Blue replied, his scientific curiosity undimmed even in crisis. But why? Because, Tom said, quickly pulling the emergency kit from the snow shelf, what we're about to learn about igloo construction could be vital for future survival situations. No one has ever tested these structures under such extreme conditions. The alien scholar's form pulsed with understanding. Even now, facing possible death, the human was thinking about how their experience could help others. Another violent temperature swing hit, dropping them to -160 degrees Celsius before rocketing up to -70 degrees Celsius in seconds. The igloo's walls creaked but held, the snow blocks shifting microscopically to absorb the thermal stress. Outside, they could hear larger structures shattering like glass. Fascinating, Dr. Blue said, his sensors recording everything. The dome shape distributes the stress evenly, while the spiral construction allows for minute movements without compromising structural integrity. It's perfectly engineered, yet requires no advanced technology. A distant rumbling began to build, different from the earlier tremors. The planet's core was beginning its final collapse. The purple sky had become a swirling vortex of electric energy, with bolts of strange lightning crawling across the ground. "Look!" Tom pointed through the ventilation hole. A small ship was descending through the chaos, its hull glowing from the atmospheric friction. "Someone's coming back for us." "They can't land in these conditions," Dr. Blue observed. "The temperature swings would tear their ship apart on touchdown." Tom was already packing snow into any small gaps in the igloo's walls. "They don't need to land. We just need to survive the next few minutes. This shelter has handled everything so far, it'll handle this too." The final test came as the planet began its death throes. Temperature swings became even more violent, the ground buckled and cracked, and the air itself seemed to crystallize and melt with each passing second. But inside the igloo, protected by nothing more than carefully shaped blocks of snow, Tom and Dr. Blue waited. When the rescue team finally reached them, using advanced force fields to create a safe corridor to their ship, they found both human and alien not just alive, but still recording data about their snow shelter's performance. Years later, Dr. Blue's presentation to the Galactic Research Institute about human snow architecture under extreme planetary collapse conditions would become the most studied xenological paper in history. But more importantly, the humble igloo design would go on to save countless lives on dangerous frozen worlds across the galaxy. The ancient wisdom of Earth's Arctic peoples, shared freely across species and stars, had proven once again that the simplest solutions are often the most powerful.